Boyarin was a protected cruiser built for the Imperial Russian Navy by Burmeister and Wain in Copenhagen, Denmark. She served in the Russian Pacific Fleet and was sunk by a Russian naval mine near the entrance to Port Arthur, Manchuria, just after the start of the Russo-Japanese War in 1904. History: a contract to build 4 second-rank protected cruisers to reinforce the Russian Pacific Fleet was issued by the Marine Ministry on 15 April 1899. It was intended that these ships be built in Danzig to the design of the cruiser Novik for reconnaissance, diviso and destroyer support duties. However, due to political pressure from the throne, the contract for the Boyarin was issued to the Danish firm of Burmeister and Wain. This created numerous issues. The cost of the Boyarin was far higher than expected, due to higher wages in Denmark and need for the shipyard to import many components. Changes made to the design resulted in problems with stability, and efforts to compensate by increasing her displacement from 2,600 tons to 3,075 tons resulted in a lower speed. Despite the increase in displacement, she was inferior to Novik in ammunition storage, the number of naval mines and layout of the bridge. The keel was laid 24 September 1900, with Commander V. I. Litvinov appointed Chief Equipping Officer. She was launched on 26 May 1901 without any presence of the Imperial Russian Navy during the ceremony, a breach of tradition and etiquette. After launching, Commander Vladimir Fedorovich Sarychev, a former captain of the gunboat Gilia, who had just returned from the Boxer Rebellion in China, was appointed captain. During factory acceptance testing in June 1902, severe vibrations revealed that the practical operational speed was only 14 knots. Armament: the main armament consisted of 6 120mm cannon guns in shielded mountings, 1 each at the bow and stern and 4 in sponsons. Anti-torpedo boat armament consisted of 8 47mm guns, 4 in the bow and stern casemates and 4 in midship sponsons. 5 torpedo tubes with 11 torpedoes were placed, 1 on the stern and 2 on each side, all above water. Protection: the armor used was crop plate, 50mm on the deck and 76mm on the conning tower. Machinery: the power plant consisted of 2 shafts with triple expansion steam engines and 16 Belleville-type boilers. Operational record: Boyarin arrived in Kronstadt on 6 October 1902, and Commander Sarychev was formally placed in command. On 8 October she was included in the Russian Pacific Fleet Reinforcement Squadron under the command of Admiral Baron Stackelberg, but broke down and had to be repaired in Denmark on the way. Upon rejoining the squadron on 19 November at Isle of Portland in England, Commander Sarychev reported to local authorities that his chief engineer had died of gunshot wounds. After passing through the Suez Canal, Boyarin was assigned to detached duty in a show of force in the Persian Gulf to reinforce Russian political interests and influence. This angered the British government, which refused to permit coaling rights at any British port, and the Russian government was forced to request that a French collier based in Djibouti escort Boyarin through the Indian Ocean. Boyarin reached Port Arthur on 13 May 1902. She was assigned to maneuvers with the 1st Pacific Squadron in the Yellow Sea, followed in June by maneuvers in the Pacific Ocean. In August she participated in several training exercises. Viceroy Yevgeny Ivanovich Alexeyev praised her in his reports to Petrograd for her utility and low consumption of coal. With the increasing diplomatic tension between the Empire of Japan and Russia, Boyarin was deployed to Gimulpo in Korea in December 1903 to safeguard Russian interests. She was relieved by the arrival of the Variag on 30 December 1903 and returned to Port Arthur. Battle of Port Arthur. On the night of the 26th of January 1904, in the Battle of Port Arthur, the opening battle of the Russo-Japanese War, Imperial Japanese Navy destroyers launched a preemptive strike on the 1st Pacific Squadron anchored within Port Arthur. Admiral Oscar Stark sent a squadron that included Boyarin in pursuit, but it succeeded only in attacking a Russian destroyer heading into port before returning to Port Arthur. Several hours later, a fleet of Japanese ships was observed to be approaching, and Boyarin was deployed on the outer roadstead. The fleet was Admiral Togo Hihashiro's main battle fleet with 6 battleships and 9 cruisers. Boyarin fired 3 shots at the fleet before fleeing back into the protection of Port Arthur and raising the alarm. That evening, Boyarin received orders to escort the minelayer Yenese to Talienwan on the west side of Port Arthur to complete laying of the last minefields. On the 29th of January, Yenese struck one of its own mines, exploded and sank. Inexperienced shore-based observers panicked and reported another attack by Japanese destroyers, and Boyarin was dispatched with 4 Russian destroyers to investigate. The cruiser also struck a mine laid by Yenese at 0816 on the 30th of January. The explosion killed 10 crew, and she sank up to her portholes. Although efforts were made to patch the breach, she began to list, and Commander Serichev gave the order to abandon ship. That evening, a team from Port Arthur found her grounded near the shoreline, evidently with repairable damage. However, she drifted during a storm that night, striking at least one other mine, and sank. Several days later, the wreckage was discovered on the bottom around 40 meters from the shoreline, and further attempts at salvage were discontinued. Serichev was found guilty at a court-martial of premature abandonment of the damaged vessel, and spent the remainder of the siege of Port Arthur on shore duty.